Hey, what's going on, traders? It's Johnny here with TraderX. Thank you guys so much for tuning back into the channel. And I wanted to go ahead and give you guys another recap and let you know how my day trading went. And so to get right into it, as you guys can see, unfortunately, it was another big red day today. I was down $177, and that consisted of trading the Nasdaq-based ETFs SQQQ and TQQQ. And so these were all my field orders. The timestamp is here on the left for you guys. And then the price points that I bought in and out of everything. And the ETF that I was trading right here in the middle. So that's there for your reference. And pretty much what I wanted to talk about today was a big mistake I made that I hope you guys can learn from. And it's ultimately what ended up costing me for the second day in a row now a big loss, right? So pretty much as we can see, the Nasdaq right at market open ended up selling off pretty aggressively, right? So it was consistently making these lower highs and lower lows and getting rejected by the EMA line. And so I wasn't actually trading this morning at market open. I started trading closer to 8 o'clock. So I believe on this push down here, I was able to make money getting into the inverse ETF. So as the Nasdaq sells off, the inverse ETF SQQQ will push up. And so given the fact that this thing was aggressively selling off on the day, I got into the inverse ETF and was actually able to make some money here and then on this play here again. So I was up about $70 to $80 on the day, and then coming to this move right over here. So I didn't get into this play, I believe, and then what ended up happening was as it picked up, I thought that this thing was going to continue to sell off right over here, right? So I was expecting another drop right around these areas, and that ultimately ended up not being the case. So as we can see, this thing actually ended up to ride the EMA and change directions. And so what happened was I thought the direction was very clearly selling off on the day. And so as it pushed up and became a little more overbought, I got in with a heavier position size here because I thought that the Nasdaq was going to continue its pattern of selling off, right? It was a very clear pattern, but unfortunately what we know about the stock market is patterns repeat themselves, but they don't always have to, right? So this was a clear example of that happening. So as this thing continued to ride the EMA up, I eventually had to cut losses on SQQQ, and that actually ate up all my profits and I believe put me even red on the day. And so I believe I actually got burned on SQs trying to predict a reversal, right? Because I beat the Nasdaq to be overextended right around these areas, but it continued to push up. And so that's a big mistake I made, was ultimately not going with the flow. So obviously the direction was very clear in the morning, but once we had that change in direction, I should have been more aware of that instead of trying to force an SQ play, right? So ultimately, as the Nasdaq continued to pick up, we saw this change in direction for, brief period of time. So it got rejected, peaked out, and then continued to sell off below the EMA. It would make these lower highs and lower lows, and so I found that to be attractive. And so once it pushed up and peaked up, I got into the inverse ETF and started to add to my position as it continued to sell off. And I thought we were going to continue to see a sell off, given the fact that if you look on a bigger time frame, we would have seen that the Nasdaq typically when it tends to peak out and touch the top VWAP, it would actually get rejected and start to sell off aggressively. And so as this thing peaked out and was touching the top VWAP and then got rejected, I thought that we were going to see this same play that happened right here on this day, where it started to aggressively sell off. And so that's ultimately what ended up biting me in the butt. As this thing continued to sell off here, I did not lock in any profits, and as you guys see, this thing changed directions very quick and actually had a rally on the day. So given the fact that the Nasdaq pushed up a lot, I'm sure most people were green today, given the fact that they invest in the typical stocks like Facebook and Apple and stuff like that. These are the biggest stocks that in the tech industry, and so they are very heavily influenced by the Nasdaq. And so given the fact that the Nasdaq had a really nice green day, we saw all of these tech stocks also have a nice surge, right? And so what I wanted to take away from today was, obviously I explained to you guys why I saw potential in SQQQ, but ultimately I fell in love with the trade, right? So you guys have probably heard me say this before, where I've fallen in love with the trade, and so as this thing continued to reverse and go south, I did not even cut losses, right? I did a horrible job of managing my risk, and I ended up having to pay the price yet again, and it's a very, very horrible feeling to to go from having a trade go green to, really, really red. But I ultimately did it to myself, right? I was the one in charge of managing my risk, and I did a poor job of that. So there's no one else to blame but me, right? So what I can take away from the future and what I want you guys to take away from is, if we look at the inverse ETF on a bigger time frame, there's no question that it was very overbought. So if we could see the past 20 days, the inverse ETF has been consistently pushing up, right? Because the Nasdaq was selling off. And so I had to be real with myself and know that right around these top areas, it tends to get rejected, right? It doesn't do a good job of holding right around these areas. And so as this thing pushed up and peaked out and approached these, more overbought areas, I should have done a good job of knowing that it had a chance of falling, especially given the fact of how overbought it was, right? So that was a big mistake that I made today, and I want you guys to be aware of. So it was a very good step in the right direction for the overall NASDAQ, but I do want you guys to be aware that it can very well, continue to sell off. It does look very overbought currently, given the trend that it's been having, where it's been falling in between this little channel here. And so it is at more of an overbought area. We may possibly tomorrow see a correction before it ultimately tries to continue to uptrend or continue to sell off. So well, we got to stay posted with that and see which direction it ultimately decides to go. But that's pretty much everything I wanted to cover today. If you guys had any questions at all or anything like that, or want me to break down a stock, just drop a comment down below and I will personally go ahead and answer that. But yeah, I hope all of you ended green today and all had a amazing day. So I will see you guys tomorrow for my recap. And I believe the rest of the week I'm actually going to be either trading simulation or with a very light dollar amount. It's mostly because I'm very red on the week already, and I do not want to risk losing more, right? So it's very simple. I just simply put, don't want to risk adding to my big loss already, given the fact that it is one of the biggest losses I've had in a while. So I definitely want to not ease or definitely not go heavy on my positions, right? So yeah, that's pretty much everything I wanted to talk about. I hope you guys have a good rest of your day, and I will see you guys tomorrow at Market Open. Take care.